Hey, friend. Alex here from Metamind Music, coming at you with a new video. Today we're doing something a little different. I'm going to be streaming my screen and going a little bit more in depth in a few concepts about how to edit your music, how to kind of organize your session, and how to kind of just have an organizational workflow to get the most out of your efforts in your DAW. So before we dive in, I want to give you my free PDF called Workflow Wizardry to help you get from your first ideas all the way to a finished product. It's a step-by-step framework to help you get through creative block, finish more music, and have a process behind your creativity to get to the finish line, to get a finished professional product. It lays it all out for you, super simple, and you can download it at metamindmusic.com/workflow, or you can download it in the description below. I'll put it there. I'll put a link there. Right on. And I hope that everything's working properly. This is my first time doing a stream like this, so I hope you can hear my vocals okay, my voice. I hope you can see my screen, and I hope that you'll be able to hear back the audio. So let's talk about workflow in the DAW. I'm a huge proponent of being organized as you go, and it helps you stay focused, and it helps you resist becoming overwhelmed and kind of lost, right? So if I'm just going to kind of jump around a few things that I think are important. First of all, as you have finished tracking, you want to place markers for every significant part of the song, right? So this song has quite a few different parts, but you're going to want to make markers just so that if you're like zoomed in and you're working on something like, let's say we zoom in here, and you're working on the nitty-gritty details of this one track, and you want to go to another marker, well, it's very easy for you to know where to go. Oh, okay, this is the chorus. Let's go back here. Or let's go to the intro. And you can just click it and start from there. It'll save you so much time as opposed to trying to guess where all these parts are by just seeing waveforms. So that's one super important thing, to just label all the parts of your songs, all the main parts, and it'll help you just navigate your session. It'll help you stay organized and focus on like where you want to kind of work on. The next thing that I would suggest is you want to name all of your tracks. You want to name all these different instruments and parts of your song, just for ease of recognition, and also all of your files will then correspond with the right names. And it doesn't really matter exactly what wording or what letters you use, as long as it's something that makes sense to you and that can be consistent over time, right? So that like if I open a different song, or if I'm working on some other track or whatever, if I'm recording someone else, I always go back to the kind of same lettering and the same labels for all my tracks to make sure that it's just very easy for me to know what's what, right? Like this is my guitar left, guitar right, guitar center for any kind of other guitar effects going on. And then this is guitar clean, my drums, my bass, synth. And sometimes I'll just name it I'll name the track what it's actually doing at the part, if it's only a small part. Like during the chorus, this track is just adding space. So that's another very important thing. And also I am a big, I really think it's important to label, also color code. If you like, all of our DAWs are equipped with all this awesome like color coding stuff, and it's beyond just being pretty and eye attracting to the eye, but it really helps you if you use colors in the same way to identify your tracks. It helps you immediately identify what's what, you know what I mean? Like I can just jump to red. I know it's bass for me all the time, or orange is drums, and my guitars are green. My lighter guitars, or even percussion or extra things that might be, are like orange, yellow, and I use blue for leads and vocals, and purple for synths and other kind of instruments. And I just use this because that's what I like to, it's something that I find easy to identify with the different instruments that are common across many songs. And I would encourage you to develop your own, but it's just so that you have a very easy way to identify what track is what really quick, right? So you're not have to look, oh, which one is my bass again? Because all of my tracks are the same color. Or if you're mismatching colors throughout different sessions. You might be like using red for bass one time, but then the next time it's purple, and then you're like, oh wait, what color was my bass? It just kind of helps you stay organized and know where everything is as you're working, which becomes important when you get into editing and you get into mixing, just for ease of use, so that it's easy to jump around and you're not getting lost in your own session. Other than that, I think that's pretty much it for like organizing and staying organized. I typically use the same format for mostly everything. Sometimes the colors might change, or I might add different names if I'm using different kinds of instruments or different kinds of sounds. But for something like this, pretty much the same. So before we get into kind of the methodology behind tracking, which I want to get into before talking about like editing and getting everything to the perfection point or close to perfection point that you're looking for. Before doing that, I'll give you a little taste of what we're working with today. It's just a song that I've had in my back pocket for a long time, and I figured that I could finish it up and share it with you guys so you guys could maybe learn something along the way. So I'll just give you a little taste, and then we'll dive in a little bit more. Right on. So that's kind of the flavor of this tune. For editing and getting stuff, I guess to edit, for me, editing is basically getting your session completely ready for the mix down, so that when you get ready to mix your music, which I haven't done any mixing at all on this, you want to not have to be editing anything. You don't want to have to go back and fine tune like your crossfades and your intersection points when you're in the process of being creative and making a mix. So that's what I think is super important, to kind of have different categories and different steps to your process. So for drums, I'm not a drummer. Like, I can play drums, but I'm no drummer by any means. And since I don't have the means to record real drums for all my songs, I program drums, which I know a lot of you might need to do. Or if you're like planning to hire a drummer, or if you are a drummer, you might be tracking yourself or working with a real drummer. But this is where I would go in to the nitty gritty of all of my MIDI notes for the whole song, and adjust the velocities, right? This is going to make your drums sound a lot more like, right now you can see that all of these things are all these velocities, which is basically how hard these different notes are being hit. I think most of them are all maxed out here because I haven't gone in and edited all these velocities, right? There's a few different ones here and here and here, but in general, they're all pretty much at the max, which will very much sound robotic, right? It'll sound like something that a human could never do, because if you think of a drummer can't hit maximum strength at the same maximum strength, the same exact amount of power behind every hit. Like, there'll be variation, right? And it's programming in that variation if you're programming drums to sound realistic, or even if you want to add a little bit more depth and dynamic to your drum tracks, percussion tracks, even if these are electric drums, you're going to want to go in here and edit the velocities so that they have a little bit more variation, right? And a few guidelines for this is, like, I would start out by selecting everything and lowering it already off the bat. And right now they were at max 127. And in general, like, I won't put anything max. I might put the hits that will have the most impact absolutely to 127. But to start, like, I don't know, we'll go somewhere around there, 116. And that will be like the middle part, because this is like a metal song. And typically for that kind of music, drummers do hit quite a bit harder. So we'll just start with a fairly high thing, and then velocity value. And then I'm just going to play this back and show you a little example of how I would go about editing some of these drums and the velocities. And keep in mind, like, I've already programmed this whole song performance wise, so I don't think I'll be adjusting too much, like the actual note values and the fills and all that, but just more so looking at the velocities. But that's basically, I would go through this whole thing and start adjusting velocities to make this sound a little bit more real. So let's give this a listen. Maybe I'll go at the right spot to start. So right now, the kicks are pretty much maxed out all the time. So I'm going to select all the kicks and probably just add some variations. So there's this little button here, which is awesome, which is called randomize. It just kind of moves everything randomly so that it's not all the same value. And just a little taste of that can go a long way. And then I might want to zoom in on certain notes, like the downbeats. I'll probably have a little stronger than the accents. So this one I'd probably lower, this one probably lower. And this could get super tedious, but as you work through it, you kind of get a workflow going. You kind of know what notes you'd want to be stronger and which ones you wouldn't. So typically the downbeat of everything is going to be a little bit harder. And like for this group right here was a lot of notes. The first one, and then these might be a little less loud. And then the last of the group, and then this one might be less loud again. And then this is the downbeat once again, right? And then for these hi-hats, I'm also going to do the same thing. We're just going to randomize it a little bit and add some variation. And then here, the same thing. Like I know that the first beat of a roll will typically be the hardest hit of the drummer. And then the left hand, which would be the odd groupings, would be less strong. And then we'll kind of, so this would be right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand if you're a drummer. So it kind of just add that variation. And then let's hop over these cymbals. These cymbals, this one's kind of weak. So I'm going to bring this up. That one looks okay. Ride. You know, this looks pretty good. And let's just give this another listen. So already that sounds a little bit better. And as you go more in depth into the whole song, you can get a lot more realism and a lot more dynamics in your drum tracks, which is what the drums do, right? The like a good drummer is very dynamic and moves with the music and really emphasizes what's going on. So that's just a little glimpse into drum editing. For bass, let's zoom in here, and guitars, I typically don't really edit them. Like I typically record bass and I record guitars in a way that I don't have to edit anything. And the way you achieve this is by tracking little parts at a time. And a lot of people kind of have a reservation, especially if they are a bassist or guitarist, about breaking up their performance this way. But I will assure you that doing this actually makes all of your performance sound tighter, because there won't be extra noise, the timing won't be off, and especially for this kind of music, like metal or rock music that's modern, it's the tightness of everything playing together that gives it its power. If you're doing something more like jazz or R&B or like a little bit more live feel, then it'd be maybe less important to get super precise like this. But unless you're super rehearsed and a phenomenal player, but even the best players, I've recorded some really great players and I still end up tracking part by part just to bring the most, or basically you want to create the most, how would you say it? The best representation of what the artist is going after. And since we've been so accustomed to hearing music being basically perfect and basically on the grid and everything hitting together, and no off notes and everything really sounds together, we're used to hearing that. And if you don't bring an artist's recording or your own recordings up to that level, it will stand out as being not quite the same quality. So what I do is just basically, I'm not a bassist, but I was just basically coming up with parts on the spot and then tracking them, right? So I track this little part. Let me solo this so you can hear it with the drums maybe. So I just played da 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 right? Just to get it super tight with the kick. You can hear it. And then this was these really quick runs. And since I didn't like rehearse it like crazy, I wasn't able to perform all this super tight like this. Like if we just listen to this section, there's 4 different parts that I took, and playing this all together I wasn't able to, but if you listen to it all together, it's super tight with the drums. And this can be very subtle. Like I'm sure I could have played this through and gotten close, but one, I didn't rehearse, I didn't practice like crazy, so and I'm not like the greatest bassist. But also, if I would have tracked this whole section all together, I probably would have had string noise, right? Like from jumping from these low gallops to this tapping part here, it probably would have had string noise or something odd about it, or the timing might have fallen off over time. And just going in sections like this, it really allows you to lock in super tight with the drums, and that's really important for the bass. And usually as I track, you'll track this little part, and then you'll track this next part. And then as you're tracking, it's a good habit to select this and do your crossfades as you go, right? So you're going to want to go here and add a crossfade and learn the hotkey for these, right? Like for Ableton, it's Shift Command F, which will add a crossfade. And what this does is it really smooths out the transition between these different audio files. So to eliminate any weird artifacts or any kind of clips and blips. And that's just a standard practice in recording and editing something, just to make sure that it's seamless and that it flows well from multiple different takes. And in doing this and in recording and tracking this way off the bat, other than maybe having to nudge the timing of one of your clips slightly to line up better with your drums or your other instrumentation, you won't really have to edit anything. And this is great because with the nature of bass and guitars and audio files of this nature, you can't really go in here. Some people would go in here and maybe cut this like this and then move this section over to get it even tighter, but you can't really cut into waveforms like this without it sounding artificial or without it sounding off, right? You want to leave the characteristics and like you want to leave it intact. Basically, you want to leave like the integrity of the waveform intact. And by doing shorter takes like this, you'll always assure that you have wave files that are totally interconnected with themselves. And then as you crossfade them, you'll have a performance that sounds really tight with your other instruments. Right, and the same thing applies with guitars. So my kind of ethos with guitars and bass is basically you want to get the best possible sound right off the bat. For bass, I basically just track DI, and then I'm going to tweak my tones afterwards. But for guitars, I got my tone as close as I wanted to the sound I wanted to achieve right off the bat. And I did the same approach. I tracked little part by part just to make sure that when everything is together, that it sounds super tight. And it already, when you do this and you approach your tracking and your recording in this manner, you'll realize how much more powerful things sound all already together. I'll give you a little example of how these kind of tight tracks or this tight type of recording can really enhance the sound. So let's just jump into the verse here. Let's jump into something where everything's pulsing together. So to me, like that sounds like everything's moving together and everything sounds powerful. And I'm not suggesting that you totally edit everything out of your, like you don't want to edit the humanness out of your performance, but for this kind of music and for rock music, you want to make it sound as tight as possible. You want to make it sound powerful, and there's still like little nuances in my playing and maybe a little bit noisier in there. I'm not a huge stickler about having everything sound absolutely crystal clean, perfect, but I just want the pulse of all of these different tracks to be in harmony and work together. So, and again, with that kind of approach, you won't have to go in here and cut any of your WAV files, which I would never recommend. You might be able to nudge them back and forth to tighten the timing a little bit, but you don't want to go in there and cut your waveforms. What I do typically with drums, if I program drums like I did with Superior Drummer, once I'm done editing everything, I will then go into Superior Drummer, and I'll get out of this editor, and I would go into the mixer, and I would route all of these outputs to their own tracks into Ableton. So I would create maybe, I don't know how many tracks there are here, but like 10 tracks. I'd create 10 extra tracks onto my DAW, and then I would route all these outputs from the drum MIDI track to these individual tracks, like for the snare, for the kick, for the overheads, for each tom individually. And then I would print all that audio, print all that MIDI data into audio. And then basically at that point, I am committed to those drums, just like as if I recorded a real drummer. Like once you record those drums, like that's what you have, right? You've committed to it. I can't go back and change the MIDI. I can't go back and adjust the velocity. That's what I'm working with. And that's a huge important step if you're programming drums and if you're wanting to make them sound like a real drum kit, or you want to enhance the impact of the sound as much as you can. You want to be able to process all these drums individually, and Superior Drummer does have an internal, see there's all this mixing done in their own mixer, but I would disable all this and do my own mixing in Ableton. And what this allows you to do is when you have these audio files, typically if you program your drums, you won't have to go in and edit them because they're already going to be very close or perfect, or however you decided to program them from your MIDI programming. But if you do record a real drummer, you can go into the waveforms and you can get away with adjusting certain hits because there's a little bit more flexibility with how you can edit drums. And maybe I'll say that for a different video where I can go in depth with how to edit real drums. But yeah, then you can edit your drums first, then track your bass, track your guitars to fit with your drums. And then in approaching it that way, once you're done editing and you've done all your crossfades and you've done all your, you would consolidate all of this into its own track, Command J, right? And just, well, we won't wait for that now, but like basically you want to sum all of these different files that you've created into one file, right? And that will help you commit to like, this is the official bass track. It is edited. It is ready to go. And then once you have all of your tracks edited like this, your drums are edited, your bass is edited, your guitars are edited, and you go into your vocals if you have vocals in your tracks, and you take out the breaths, you edit maybe nudge the syllables a little bit so that they pulse right with the music. Once all that is complete, then you can move along to mixing your track. And that's pretty much all I have for you guys today in terms of organization. If you have any questions in regard to like how to go about tracking or editing this stuff or organizational workflow, just drop a comment below and I'll come back and answer it at a later time, or I'll make another video explaining it. I'd be happy to do that. So before I leave, I just want to remind you to grab your free Workflow Wizardry PDF in the description below, or you can get it at metamindmusic.com/workflow. It's a simple PDF. It's a free gift. I want you to have it. It'll help you finish more music. It's great as a guide to just have by your studio desk to help you stay focused in those steps. And yeah, other than that, we'll let you go, and I'll be back soon with another tutorial and some more guidance on making your music. And until then, I hope you stay safe and stay well.